Welcome back to the Tansson Talks show. I'm Brandon, the host of the show, and I always love doing this. Well, ending out our winter season of the podcast, I'm excited to welcome my guest here today, Amanda. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Yeah, look forward to our discussion.
Yes, I look forward to it as well. And so, first of all, how are you doing here today?
I'm good. Currently in Dublin, Ireland, so the time difference is 6 hours, but we're here.
Well, I'm so excited, like I said, to have you, and I always love whenever we're able to do a international episode. And thank you so much for wanting to be on.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and so before we get started, are you able to introduce yourself for the watching or listening audience here today?
Yep. So my name is Uwase. I am a Black and Irish business student, currently studying in France. I'm studying global business. I'm about to go and start my placement in Luxembourg in communication and events. Aside from me academically, I am a podcast host as well. I am the host of a podcast called the Business Student Podcast, where I interview professionals and business students who are going through the business world, whether that's they're doing an internship or whether it's giving advice to fellow business students, or even just professionals who have already gone through everything and are here to give you advice. I just love to equip students with tools, whether you're a student, whether you're going to be a student, or whether you're a professional and you just want to feel like you're a student again. That's my podcast, the Student Podcast. And other than that, I'm just a girl. I dance, go out with my friends, travel a lot. If I were to sit here and count how many flights I've been on, it's actually in America, over in the States, in Virginia, and in Washington, in New York, and loads of places in Europe, to name a few, Croatia, and I believe Croatia and the UK, let's just say that. But yeah, I'm just an all-rounded person here to self-develop and all this jazz. But yeah, that's me.
Well, I love that, and I'm just so excited, like I said, to have you on. And so I definitely want to start off, like I said, by asking you about your podcast. So are you able to tell the listeners a little bit about it? And yeah, and when did you become a part of the podcast?
So I took over the podcast last year in 2023 in August. It was previously started by a business student who was in my course called Cleena Jordan, and she had started this and pitched it to a company called Bowsy. They had picked her up and decided to accept to sponsor the podcast and help her start it. I applied for it through LinkedIn. If you know anything about me, you know I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn babe. And I applied, I did the interview because previously to this podcast, I had ran two other podcasts. So it was really a thing of continuing that, especially at the time was just about to move to France to start my studies over here. So it was really something close to my heart, being a business student, wanting to get advice from anyone who will willingly give it to me. So I think it was great for networking, great for helping other people in my current situation, and also great for just expanding and growing as a podcaster. So, and then a bit about the podcast. So, the podcast, its aim is to equip business students and young professionals with the knowledge, insider knowledge of the industry. Because one thing about business and the business world, it's very fast paced. I do not believe studying in the classroom is enough to equip you for the real world. Like, you need internships, you need experience, you need all this jazz, and having someone to give you the advice because they've already gone through it, that you don't necessarily have to go on coffee dates with and meet up regularly with. You could just hop on Spotify and listen to the podcast episode, is very refreshing. So I thought I would carry on what Clena's vision was, because I also shared a similar vision in terms of giving people that insider knowledge.
Well, that's so exciting, and yeah, that's great that you were able to, yeah, I mean, to pick up the brand from where it left off, and be able to expand upon it and start your own chapter of it. And so, how would you say that your chapter was defined for this podcast?
It was fun by bringing it to visual video. Before I had taken it over, it was just audio. and it was great, but it wasn't there yet for, especially for our generation to consume. Because one thing about our generation, we love to see the people who are speaking. For me, I honestly don't mind because I honestly love listening to podcasts, hence I'm a podcaster. But I definitely was like, okay, people need to see people. And I tried my best in terms of my chapter and how I defined it. Before I had taken it over, it was just a bit visual. Sorry, before I had taken it over, it was just audio. And then I decided to bring it to visual because our generation is a very visual generation. We love to see before we can hear. So I wouldn't agree with that because I'm a podcaster like yourself, but I definitely think it pushed and added to the fact that more people were interested in the podcast, more people streamed it, and it really gave a boost also for our guests. But the obviously issues in terms of not having a camera and even my phone, it's good but not that good. So I'm looking to book more studios. For example, we actually were in London recording in the studio. We're going to be in Paris next month recording in the studio, and it's 10 times better because it's in person and you can really take the conversation to different places and also go with your audience. But at the same time, literally what we're doing here, it does the job and it does get the information out. It's just a thing of using our voices as much as possible, if that makes sense. But I definitely do believe I brought in that, and also marketing wise, I added in where I got my guests to send in videos of themselves because before we went visual, we had to do with what we had. So I said, at least let them see your faces and see that these are people, use our lives. So we have visuals to promote the episodes, and I really am a marketer at heart. So when it came to that, I really pushed for videos because as a digital marketer, that's kind of what I do. And also coming on, branching onto TikTok, and hopefully next year branching on to also YouTube. Since I already have the videos on Spotify, why not wait hours as well for YouTube? But you know the struggle sometimes with YouTube uploading, but it just has to happen because I feel like that's where the podcast is heading. Yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying, and I'm so glad that you're able to expand everything. Was it during your chapter of hosting and producing the podcast? And so that's certainly very exciting that you have the opportunity. You were able to, to take over and hit the ground running. And so, out of curiosity, during that time where you were, were just given the podcast, was there any sort of transition period? Did the previous host have any advice for you, or how was that? And were you familiar with the show at all prior to taking over?
So prior to taking over, before I had applied, I had seen the podcast on LinkedIn, and then once I applied, I started to listen to the podcast because I was like, let me do my homework for this interview. I passed through the interview stage, got in the podcast. I was very happy with myself, and I only had found out at the podcast at the interview stage that actually the podcast she was doing it with another friend of her who was helping her, but it was mostly her. And in terms of how often I post and how often she posted when she could. I post every 2 weeks because at first it was every week, and then the company were like, let's be real, this is not it's feasible, we can't continue to, if that makes sense. Every week is a bit much, and it was a lot for me, but I didn't bother because I was very happy to do it. So in terms of the transition, I was given passwords, documents, everything I needed in terms of all of that. What I did do myself is change the logo. Not the logo, I kept the logo. I changed the poster and kind of modernized it. I had a graphic designer on hand and she designed everything for me, and she's actually going to be on the podcast very soon. So I'm excited to have that conversation with her. But yeah, advice I had her on the podcast, and I guess the advice was it's get ready for a lot of work, a lot of late nights, but it's going to be very rewarding in terms of your network. She did mention because she had worked in Google, Amazon, how the podcast kind of helped her get these opportunities. And which is something I was like, oh, that's great. Because I not only do I love this podcast and podcasting, and it will also help me to get different opportunities. But I just think in terms of advice, it was kind of like you're going to be learning on the job. And since I already kind of knew how to edit, all this jazz. I don't think she really had much more to say other than it's a different ball game because it's more professional than what I've been doing. What I had previously been doing wasn't as professional, but this definitely kick up professional. But I mean, it's the business world, you know.
Yeah, I definitely understand, like I said, what you're saying, and I'm so glad that like I said, you're able to grow that legacy. And so, I know you were telling me a little bit beforehand is that similarly to how the previous host left, found a replacement, and continue on, you'll be doing the same thing.
I will, and I'm petrified. Like I don't want to give the podcast up, but I do realize that I don't want to gatekeep. I don't want it to die with me, this podcast, and I would love to give another business student the opportunity to really make this their own. Like there's certain things I love to do, like build a website, go to different studios. Like if I was more tech savvy and stuff like this, so I know that there is somebody out there who would love to have the opportunity to do this with the backing of a whole company. So I think it's something that I'm looking at, and I am looking at people who are interested. It is exclusive to the Europe. Sorry, guys, but if you know anyone in Europe, just let me know. And just due to time and everything and the business. But I mean, yeah, very much looking for someone to replace me in April.
Well, that's certainly very exciting. So, do you have any plans for what you hope to do with the show between as of recording this and April? And I know that by the time this releases, of course, we'll be a lot closer to April than we are now. But what are your hopes within that span?
So my hopes within that span is to release podcast episode I've recorded in Paris. I have three that I've recorded in Paris, and I'd love to release those. To also get on a few influential business entrepreneurs in Ireland, and also try and get on one more French guest or even a guest within my company. One thing about me, you put me in a new community, I will get someone on the podcast. I just love to, get people on and get them talking and sharing advice. But definitely a couple more interviews will be lined up. But by April, I think it'll just be a thing of I'm uploading, because by then it really will be. I'm doing interviews as well in April, and hopefully by May we have someone to hand it over to, because I also during that time will be writing my thesis. So we'll see how everything goes. But hopefully I get a few, two, three more people in, and then yeah, that's me done.
Well, that's certainly so exciting, and I will say too that to let the audience know, though I'm sure they'll know before this, is that you recently had me on as a guest, which is so exciting.
Yes. I recently had you on as a guest, and the episode will be coming out very shortly. And it's a thing where you're my now second international guest. Before you, I had on Amaya, and I have you on. So it really is, honestly, very grateful to be able to connect with people across the pond. Because yeah, we usually don't do that in Europe, but we love to. We love to connect with people from across the pond, since honestly the world has just become a village, and it's so good that we're able to all kind of relate to the way we're living and kind of gain insight into each other's lives, and learn something. So yeah, can't wait for that to yeah go on.
Yeah, it certainly was so exciting. I'm so glad that you invited me, and that we were able to meet. I said through a mutual guest as well, who herself is the podcaster that I've had on my podcast.
Yeah, it's just a web. It's just a web of everyone's on each other's podcast, but it's great. It's good to see that we all want each other to be heard and to hear each other out, and also share the valuable insights we all have. So I think it's honestly a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and what's so funny about that is, speaking of that giant web, is that I'd actually met her because both of us had interviewed a mutual guest.
We're just ping ponging out. This is the thing about podcasters. We just love to connect. Like networking is our middle name, and I think that's something that you kind of have to have, whether you're introvert and extrovert. You have to want to network and meet new people, and I think that's really good. In the sense of that's how one grows their career, their podcast. It's by networking. So well done to us.
Yeah, 100%. And I definitely wanted to shift gears a little bit to your personal story. So are you able to tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are as a person, and maybe something a little bit that you don't normally share on your podcast?
Interesting. Personal. As a person, I guess I'm somebody who's very. At first, when you meet me, I'm very bubbly, but as you get to know me, you'll see I'm someone who's very insightful and very deep. I don't tend to move the same way everyone else moves. I like to do things in my own way, because I love to live my life unapologetically, being myself and being confident in the decisions I make. And I try to live my life with this whole thing of no regrets, but also being responsible. If that makes sense. So, to be less philosophical, I grew up in Ireland, grew up in Dublin. All my primary school, secondary school, been here. Then for university, the current course I'm doing is a double degree. So basically, I've done 2 years in Ireland and then 2 years in France. Hence, I gone to France last year, and now I'm currently finishing up my degree, I guess, in France by doing a placement. And one thing I'll say about me, throughout the whole degree, I've just been a person who's always started like joined societies and become president of a society. Like I'm always in different places, different colleges, because I kind of want to see it all. Because I'm very open minded. Aside from school, I'd say I'm a person of faith. My faith is something that's very close to my heart, and that's something that I hold dear to myself. I love my friends, love my family, and I'm one that, yes, I do dream big. I don't believe anyone should dream less or small, but I do have realistic plans for each year. Like, for example, every quarter I kind of change my vision board and kind of see what it is I envision for my life, and I'm looking forward to doing that for the New Year's and going into the new year with a mindset of going to do this in terms of dance. I'm gonna go into a dance battle, and get past the preliminaries. Or in terms of gym, I'm gonna start gym and stay consistent. In terms of the podcast, you know, do the podcast to stay consistent. But that's, I guess, a little about me.
Well, that's certainly quite exciting, and yeah, and I'm so glad, like I said, that you're able to one change up your vision board, yeah, every few months, and stay consistent with your vision. And so, if someone were to look at your vision board now, like what would it say? What does it tell about you?
Would you say it's my screensaver? So, we got on the top right, we've got money. 'Cause I need to save that and start making more money. And we have, uh, also, because I'm Rwandan originally, I have Rwandan dancers. So one thing about me, next year I'd love to go back to Rwanda and learn traditional dance so I can teach it to other people. I also have a picture of a podcast, hence the current podcast I have now and the podcast I want to start. I also have a picture of someone who's graduating. You can't see your face because it's a shadow. Hence, I'll be graduating but twice. Hence the shadow. And then a picture of someone in a really businessy outfit, because that's kind of what I'm going for style in terms of that. But that's just my vision board now, off of my phone. But yeah.
Well, that's so exciting. Like I said that you're able to one about to graduate twice. First of all, how was that for you? Are you excited for it? When you're set to graduate?
So I'm set to graduate, the first time in Dublin in October, and the second time in France in December. So I'm looking forward to doing it twice. Really am, because I'm gonna do the most both times. You know. Yeah.
Well, that's so exciting, and yeah, I'm so glad was that it excited for you. And definitely, there's a lot of questions I'd love to ask, of course, and being cautious with your time as well that you have. But I want to start off and actually ask. So, how is it for you to start off your degree? Yeah, where you're from in Ireland, and first of all, how far away? Yeah, is that from where you currently reside? And then, how was it moving to France for the second part of your degree?
So so in Ireland, I'm lucky that my university is like a 10-minute drive from where I live, so it wasn't that hard. And because of that, I got very comfortable. So comfortable I had to do the year again because I just got carried away with school, not school, people. But let's just say the second semester didn't treat me so well. So I did the year again. But I'm grateful because my year that I had started with wasn't exactly the nicest in terms of people you'd want to go away with. So I got lucky with the year I am with this currently. They're much nicer, much more welcoming, and people that can actually just be like, you know what, like you're fine, like nothing's deep. So I'm grateful actually. And then moving to France, I thought moving to France I would have no problems speaking French because I love French. Hence, I picked this course. But no, the French people are hard to crack, but I cracked a few, and I'm so grateful because they are lifelong friends, you know, definitely. But at the same time, I learned a lot about myself living abroad. I highly recommend everyone, if you can, do a year abroad too, like I did, and you'll learn so much about yourself in terms of who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what's a Thursday evening for you when you are paying rent. You know, you enjoy your rent. That's the answer. But it's a different experience. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was ups and downs, but I would do it again if I could. You know. So yeah, that's kind of the answer in a nutshell.
Well, that's certainly, like I said, exciting. Like I said, that you were able to study abroad and, like I said, do two parts of your degree. And so overall, like, how have your studies been? And is there a different level, like, of rigor between, like, doing everything in Ireland versus doing everything in France?
Yes, I say the big difference is in France it's all in French, and in Ireland it's in English. And obviously my mother tongue is English, so it was having to actually really learn the language to a level that is good enough, to a college level, and essentially. But I will say in France, because Ireland's level of education is quite high, France academically speaking was not hard. Like it was easy to pass and even more easy, like not even more easy, but like if you put your head down you get a great grade, you know. So I definitely am grateful for that. But because of that, because it wasn't as challenging for me, I joined different societies. Like I joined the geopolitics society, I joined the African society, I joined the dance society. Like I had the time to be in these different societies. So but in Ireland I also did the same, but look, different story. I think the first year I was in like 10 societies and we were online. So as you can see, I love meeting new people. But yeah, the difference was the language. But I think for me, I'm fortunate enough that the language wasn't an issue in the terms of my French is at a good level. Always could get better, but it is at a good level. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad that it's at a good level and that you're able to adapt quickly, even if you had to sort of deal with the language barrier, like of okay, not only do I have to do this assignment, it might be a rigorous assignment, but I need to do it at the college level and in another language. But apparently, that's no problem for you.
We thank God. Yeah, no problems. Yeah.
Well, that's good at least. And I know you mentioned, one of the things on your vision board is starting up a new podcast after you pass over, the current one. And so, overall, like, what are your thoughts about, let's say, that process? And is there any indications right now as to what you'd want to do with the new show that might be a little different or similar to your current show?
I think the new show is going to be completely different because, for one, it will be professional. I think one thing I will share is I will be interviewing people, but I also will have standalone episodes. Because for me, the reason I'm kind of like is because I still have so many different names I could choose from. So what I'm going to do is, because I noticed, because I'm always on TikTok, a lot of TikTok talkers who are, they talk a lot on TikTok. What they do is they capitalize on that and they start a podcast. You know. So one thing about me is because I've already started two previous podcasts and this one, um, and I haven't done a thing where I'm on TikTok and then I start a podcast. I feel like I owe it to myself to start on TikTok because one thing about me is I'll always start a TikTok account, but it's for business purposes or personal purposes. It's never for podcast purposes. And I have it for the business student podcast, but I still feel like that's business, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna see now if I were to document my life, because if you think about it, I'll be working abroad, living abroad. That's something people tend to like to watch and consume. And why not just document it and then from there build an audience and then bring that audience to Spotify, you know? So this is kind of the strategy I'm going to be taking into 2025. Even if it doesn't work, at least I'll have an idea of what I want to talk about on my podcast. Because community, you know, I want to build a community before I start a podcast, if I'm being honest. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for.
I love that. And yeah, I definitely am excited to hear, later down the line how you're able to, like I said, you're able to take the podcast audience to TikTok and then the TikTok audience to, your new podcast and vice versa and be able to make that new community. And it's so interesting because you have the double challenge of one, not only, of course, growing your current show, you're growing it to pass it along, but then you're starting a new show. So you're sort of like, you need to keep the audience continue going with the new host, of course, of the current show, while also trying to make sure that, like, hey, but if you want to stick around for me, you can do both. Stick around for me as well, alongside them following you on TikTok. So, even though it's a challenge, I'm sure that you are up to it and already have a game plan ready.
I hope so. It just has to work. But honestly, yeah, like I'm excited honestly because a TikTok I take it as a joke. Like it's a funny app, but having to actually share my thoughts, my actual thoughts, not that they're bad, it's just that they're mine, you know. Um, it's gonna be interesting, you know. But we'll get there, you know. We'll get there.
I love that. And yeah, I know for myself, as we're speaking a little bit back on your show, is that, I've had a few podcasts before. And so, my first ever podcast was the Brand Tech podcast that was 2017 to 2019. That was based off my YouTube channel that was very technology focused. That started in 2016. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just doing this just to try it out. And then I was like, okay, well, now I'm about to enter college. Let me be a little bit more professional, consistent. And so I made a new podcast, a very similar name, Brands Tech without the word podcast. And so that one, 2020 to 2022. And with that one, I started having guests on for the first time. And so I was really able to, I feel like, grow as a person. My story, for me personally, podcasting coincided with that of my studies. And so in fact, I started both my full time graduate. I started my full time undergraduate experience and podcasting with guests in the same month of January 2020, and I ended both of those in December 2022. So truly, they are an intertwined story, and I had started another podcast as well that I'd planned to be a little bit more personal. It sort of differed a little bit from what I had planned for it, the Brains Corner podcast. And sure enough, here I am today. I decided, instead of having two shows and confusing everybody, let's just have one show that I'm consistent with every week. And so, sure enough, here I am today with the Tansson Talks show. And now, of course, this being episode 108. And so, yeah, but I definitely know that even though it's a challenge, of course, trying to maneuver, from one show to another, I know that you're certainly up to the challenge. And I actually want to hear a little bit about your previous shows. So, what were some of your previous podcast shows about?
Okay, so my very first podcast show was actually just because I was a president of this society, a public speaking society. And I was just thinking, what can we do to make this more interesting? Because no one's coming to our events. No one's really here. We just have the committee and people aren't really showing up. So we made a game plan. I decided, look, guys, we're going to have a podcast and you are all going to be on it. I got two people, recruited two of my friends to be podcast hosts, managers. I call them podcast managers, but essentially they were podcast hosts. And the reason I picked them is because they're very loud, boisterous, talkative, like they're just the whole package when it comes to podcasting. So I was like, yeah, I don't care if you've never podcasted in your life, I'm going to teach you. So I taught the both of them how to, talk on the podcast. I gave them the equipment, the editing tools, and it was done on their phone. So it was very easy and the quality was fine at the time. But that's what we did. We had the podcast episode and we had different people on, different societies on. So that was a collab. So we could connect with different societies. But also we did events with different societies. So we collab with the Dance Society, not that, sorry, the Drama Society, the Music Society, whole karaoke nights, all this jazz. So the Speakeasy DCU, that's what it was called, and it was just everything student life. Whether you're going on your holidays, what you're gonna drink this weekend, red flags, green flags, really college based topics, and it was fun, and we just enjoyed the process. We didn't really care for listeners because we were like, we did it, and it was really interesting, and we actually very controversial. We had basically there was elections going on in our university, right? And for the first year of the podcast, we had on the candidates that I believe would win, and they all won. So then we tried this the following year, and there was upheaval because everyone wanted to go into the episode of the elections. I said no to certain people, and then they were trying to report me, and I said, "Oh hell no!" So what they did is they got the actual radio society in our university to put on a whole production of the elections off the bit, like off of the idea that we made, like, well, we created as my society. So I was like, y'all are ripping. You're not even giving me credit. But at the end of the day, we still had people on who won the elections because we know who's going to win because, we're very, observant. But it was interesting. I had to laugh to myself because I'm like, it's just a podcast. And you have the other opportunity to be on I don't know. But people, during elections, they do crazy things. They say crazy things. They create enemies. And I'm just not a political person. I just like to interview winners. Like, that's all. But yeah, that was the Speaking TDCU. And then following on to that, we had the African Babes. The African Babes podcast. We had that. That was the first professional one. We were in the studio. We had cameras. We had reels on TikTok. It did very well, and it grew really quickly. And I feel like the reason it grew is because it was cultural. Like, you're like, oh, I'm African. I'm gonna follow. I'm gonna see what they're talking about. And we talked about topical things like African culture, African shops, like everything to do with African and being in Europe. And I did this with a friend of mine. It only lasted 3 months because I had to go to France after that. But it was so fun. I really enjoyed it. And it's something I wish we could have continued. But like you said, sometimes other people aren't as willing to keep going. So, I couldn't continue it on my own. So I had this podcast and been to the podcast, and then yeah, the rest, history. The rest is history. So yeah, that's my accommodation of podcasts.
Well, that's certainly, like I said, such an interesting story to learn more about, and I'm so glad that you've been able to have very different experiences, yeah, throughout, and that your ideas were able to become a reality, even if in some cases that you were not the one that was able to make them into that reality if someone borrowed without asking for some of those
Yeah,
ideas.
I know it's really sad to say, but it's not even the first time. But you know what? I always say to myself, you can never copy an original. You can never. You can't make the like once you're the original, you're the original. So I'll get my, flowers. Maybe not now, but in another way. But I'm just happy I was able to facilitate that and keep people on their toes. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I definitely did want to ask a little bit too. And so outside of just podcasting, like, what are some other things that you enjoy doing within your day to day?
I'd say dance. That's something I really, really love. I dance. My type of dance I do is Afro dance, and basically it's an umbrella term for the different dances you can find from Africa, like Coupe de Calais from Ivory Coast, Azonto from Ghana, Niger style from Nigeria. There's a lot of styles. I'm piano from South Africa, but I fell in love with this all in 2021. I started taking dance classes because I just loved the Afrobeats, and I started here in Dublin, started taking classes at Southside Moves, and from there, not only did I find my love for dance, but I also found a community of other people who also love to dance. And from there, I've been traveling to the likes of Netherlands for dance camps, Spain, Germany, and along the way, I've met some amazing people as well who also love to dance, but funny enough, have a similar personality to me. So I'm just like, we're friends. So it's been a saving grace. Dance has, and it's just been an outlet just for life and being able to share my creativity because I would say I'm a very creative person, but I guess not in traditional sense. I don't draw, I don't paint. I'm more so come up with ideas. I'm a talker, and I'm also a dancer. So yeah, I'd say that's what I do in my outside of podcasting spare time.
Well, that's pretty cool. And I know, that you are getting ready now to, to move on to your next part of your journey in terms of, moving around to Luxembourg. And so how's that for you? And how did that opportunity come about for you?
Yeah, well, you know what? I've never been to Luxembourg. Funny, yeah. I'm going to work somewhere I've never been, but I will be there in a couple of weeks, guys. But the way I came across that is actually basically for my course, you have to complete two internships, one in Ireland and one in a French speaking country. It could be France, it could be Luxembourg, it could be Switzerland or Belgium. And so, first, when I started to look in August, I was thinking Paris. Then September came around, and I still was stuck to Paris. October, I was given I was about to be given an offer, but I don't know what, but it fell through, and so I didn't get it. And it was for a gaming company for Bridge. Like, have you ever heard of Bridge, the game? I
A
was
little bit.
I was going to have to market that to young people. So I'm kind of glad I didn't get it. I'm kind of glad. And manager wasn't very nice. She was very, yeah, very rude. And it was in Paris. But I'm kind of glad I didn't get it because now I applied for this job on LinkedIn. We did the interview in French and then we did the final interviews in English. And I think this is perfect for me because it's still in French because the one thing I was scared about going to Luxembourg is because a lot of them speak English there. They do speak French, but mostly English. And I was like, I'm worried I won't be speaking French. And then they were telling me in the office you'll speak French, but all the work will be in English. So I feel like I won't be limited in terms of my creativity. So basically, I'll be doing communications, internal and external for the company, and I'll also be helping with their podcasts because they have a podcasting office. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can help these out. I don't know. We'll see. So I'm really looking forward to the challenge and being able to upskill in marketing, communications, but it's also events. Because I think one thing I really love doing that I've only realized recently is putting on events. I've always put on events in DCU and even here in France. I'd always be attending events, putting on events, whether it's dance or whatnot. So I think it's something that I'll enjoy and, a challenge I'm willing to take on because why not? But yeah, that's me.
Well, that's certainly exciting, and I like that. One, of course, for your internship in Luxembourg, that you are able to, speak French in the office because, of course, that's a requirement of your internship. Otherwise, well, as you mentioned, you'd hate for you to do all the stuff you've known, maybe an basic experience, just to say sorry that didn't qualify. So I'm glad
Mhm.
that was able to work out, but that thankfully, since the written stuff is in English, you're able to get the best of both worlds and in a new environment.
Exactly. And it's just interesting because apparently they're nicer down there. So I really do hope. Because I'm just tired of, yeah. Because apparently in France, well, not apparently, literally, if you smile at anyone, they will see you as crazy. So it's really, so I'm looking forward to happy people. Does that make sense? Because we're very happy people, Irish people in general. So yeah, I think that'll be refreshing. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
That's so exciting, and since you mentioned at the very beginning during your introduction that you love travel, you've traveled to all over the place, to include Virginia within the United States. So how have all your travels been? And I'd love to hear about your Virginia one as well.
Uh, this year, this year travels. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this year, and if there's any highlights from previous years that you really really enjoyed.
I'd say this year would have been the biggest highlight, because going to the States, honestly, I didn't think we'd be going this year, but we did. I'll start off with the States because I think that was a big highlight for me. Like we were in Virginia for 10 days. We were in Dumfries, is that correct? We have family there, so that's why we were there. And we also went to Washington, Alexandria. We were in Alexandria. We were also in Washington D.C. That's where I actually met Amaya. I met her in one of the shopping centers, which was really cool because I was like, oh my god, all the way from the Ireland to it's crazy. I was just like, this is crazy. But if I had known, I would have seen you beforehand. If we had met, but unfortunately, next time I'll be back in America. But Virginia was a very quiet place. It was very, very warm. I was like, God, how y'all, But it was great. Like people were nice, and then we went to New York, and I feel like New York really took my breath away. I was like, wow, like Times Square, like it was just very. There were so many rats, though. That's one thing I'll say about New York. There's more rats than people. But it was great to see family, to be with my whole family, and we're a big family, so it was crazy. And I loved America, and I'll definitely be back for California, New York, and maybe even Virginia again. But yeah, it was amazing in terms of America. I went to Croatia in April for an EU project I was a part of to encourage young people to vote in the elections that had happened in June. And that was a part of a 13-month project I was a part of, where we basically were creating content for TikTok and Instagram to encourage young people to vote, because the participation level very low of young people in the European elections, and the EU wanted to change that, so they tasked us with this, and it was great. We had been to Croatia, Greece, Portugal. We're getting somewhere. Where else? Portugal, well, we were in Ireland, but that's really cow. And I'm just missing somewhere. It'll come to me. Croatia. Well, sure. Look, Italy. We're in Sicily. That was the last one. We were also in Sicily, but it's the fact that it was something I never thought I'd be doing, traveling, for a cause that's so dear to my heart. Because I do believe, as young people, we should be voting, because this future is more. It's so much more our future than parents, if that makes sense, and older people. So yeah, that's kind of my highlight in terms of travel. And Germany. Germany, Berlin. That took the cake. For me, that was like amazing. I loved it. Was there seeing a few friends, went to Berlin, went to Stuttgart. It's another city in Germany. And I honestly could say I'm happy to go back next year, because yeah, I really like Germany, guys. It's a great place. But yeah, that's a bit of me.
I love that, and I'm so glad that you were able to have so many amazing experiences with traveling, going all over the place. And as of recording this, I never actually left the continental U.S., but I'm hoping to 2025. I do know I'll be starting off the year with. A trip, of course, this is record a few weeks before that, but nevertheless, I'm so excited to expand my palette of traveling a little bit, and so I'm so glad that you were able to make the most of so many of these little adventures, and that's great that you were able to visit family in Virginia. Dumfries is about 2.5 hours north of where I am, and so I'm so glad that you're able to visit our lovely Commonwealth of Virginia.
Honestly, great time. It was a great time. Be back soon. Don't worry. But yeah.
But yeah, and so yeah, and actually, before I head into some of our closing thoughts, I did actually want to ask a little bit about something that you had mentioned in passing, and so you said that when you were in Washington D.C., I believe that's where you met Amaya. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that story.
Okay, so basically, we and Amaya had met online earlier on this year. It was so funny. I met her in the comment section of some influencer on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Oh, hey, girl, you want her to mentor you too? Me too." And then I just messaged her like, "Do you actually want to call into my podcast, since yours also have a podcast?" And she was like, "Yeah." So we did a pre-call similar to what we did, and we hopped on the pre-call. We talked, and we actually went over to the time. We went over the half an hour, and I was like, "We need to meet up in person." Like, and then I told her I'm actually coming to Virginia, and she was by chance also going to be there, in Washington, and so I was like, it's not far from where I will be, so I will drive and come to see you. And I convinced my parents. We set a date, and the date came, and we saw each other, and it was just like crazy to see that. Well, a little, not a little, a lot. Well, it wasn't even a lot. A little communication could get you to do it. So it was great to see her. I met her and her boyfriend actually. We went for food. We walked around. We bought some stuff, and it was really nice to just be able to see someone that was behind the screen, So I was shocked that it happened, and I had to post it on LinkedIn. But it was great. It was really great, and I look forward to coming across her again whenever I'm in the States or when she's in Europe. So yeah.
That is so exciting. I'm so glad that both of you had a chance to meet in person. Yes, that communication does come, such a long way.
It does, and I'm just glad that she was so good. She's a very good communicator, and thank God, being a podcast host, and also is on her podcast as well. So it's just great to be able to, meet, share ideas, and see how we can both grow in our respective fields. But yeah, it was great.
That's amazing. I know for myself that for one of my podcast guests I had on earlier in 2024, Reed, I had a chance who resides in the United Kingdom. I had a chance to meet him in person in November 2024, and so that was so exciting. Let's say to meet somebody, in person, and and even throughout some of the more local people, I've had a chance to to see having the podcast, being able to see them in person, whether intentionally or by chance. I know that there were a few times, in fact, over the last few years, that I would just happen to be somewhere, and someone's like, "Brandon," and I remember one time a few years ago, I'd even gotten a pizza, and someone's just like, "You're the podcast guy." It's like, what? It's like, you had my brother on a podcast. It's like, really, So it's so exciting to have these connections, get to know people, and get to hear their stories.
It is, and it's just like it's beautiful to see that how impactful the podcast actually is to other people. Because I just feel like it one opens your mind, but two, it makes you believe you can actually do what you set out to, what you dream. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say, especially when reaching out to potential guests, is that I'm on a mission to bring people together, and one of my hopes is that people are able to tune into these episodes, or even segments of the episodes, even the thoughts of the episodes, and and just see, wow, this is what they were able to do, and maybe if I put my mind to it, maybe this is something that I can do, or or follow their own passions. And so I'm so glad that's able to work out, and that we're able to continue on our own missions. And so I did want to ask, so what does it mean for you to be able to tell your story here on my podcast?
Ooh, interesting. I guess it means me being able to accept who I am and be able to share that with other people. Because one thing about me, I do wear a lot of different hats, and to be able to just articulate those different hats and to be able to say, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's my story, and be able to share with others because it's not a story many people have. Both living abroad and also being a podcast host and navigating that. I just feel like it's good to be able to share how I'm doing it because many people would think it's impossible. Like you would think if you move away, you wouldn't take anything extra on, but I did the exact opposite and looked for stuff to do. So yeah, just living your life with no regrets and doing what you need to do, what you want to do, actually, not necessarily what you need to do to make yourself happy. So yeah, I guess it needs sharing my life so that other people could be inspired, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
I love that. And how does it feel being on the opposite side of the the virtual podcasting room to not be the host but to be a guest on a podcast?
It's weird. I was like, you're asking questions like, what's he gonna ask me next? I'm like, I usually know, but I mean, it's nice, weird, but a nice weird in the sense of wow. It's good to be interviewed. It's good to be able to share your thoughts, and it's good to have to make me think. Actually, what am I going to say? But it's natural as well. So because you're doing it very effortlessly and very professional, so it's like it's easy to just like to answer your questions because they're not like wait, So yeah, I'd say it's weird but nice.
Well, I certainly, like I said, love that. And I know, like I said, when I was on your show, you did an amazing job as a host. And so I definitely did want to commend you on your amazing hosting abilities. And I certainly felt very, welcome. And, and I'm so glad I had a chance to be a part of the family and hosted by you before you hand over the reins and later in 2025.
Honestly, I'm glad because honestly, people need to know more about you, Brandon. Honestly, because you had a lot to share, a lot of experience you've had, and It's great that you're able to share that with my audience and that they're able to get a bit of you before the next one now comes over, whoever they are, he or she may be. We don't steer they over here. But yeah, I'm excited to post that and for everyone to hear it once I release the episode. But yeah,
I'm excited. And did you have any advice that you would like to share for the next host of the podcast?
build a website. Build a website and don't care how many people listen. Just care that you actually edited and posted it because that's all that matters. You have no control over the metrics. All you have control over is the marketing and the posting of the episode. And once you've done that, don't think about the podcast. As much as you want to, don't. Because it all works out. At the end of the day, you'll realize it only takes one person to look, like the right person to look at the podcast um, for it to blow. So don't think of it necessarily for it to blow, but think of it for your growth. Then are you learning? Are you being mentored? Are you getting what are you getting out of the podcast? Yes, we love our audience, but what are you getting out of the podcast? That's a question you have to ask yourself, and also to know your why. That's a lot of advice, but moral of the story is build a website. But yeah.
I love that. And I did want to ask too, if anyone would like to check out, your current podcast or anything that you do personally or your TikTok pages, where are the best places for those people to find you, potentially reach out and hear you a little bit of your story?
Okay, so I'll give you the rundown. Everything obviously will be in the description because your amazing host Brandon will sort that out. But in terms of the current podcast I have, it is the Business Student Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as TikTok. On TikTok is the Business Student Podcast dot podcast. It's the initials, if that makes sense. And personally, you can find me on TikTok on the Amanda Rose Show, and I will give all the information to Brandon so he can put it in so you find the right one. And on Instagram, my personal Instagram is amanda.r_24. I will send that over because I kind of said that fast. But yeah, that's me.
That's amazing. And before we close out this episode, I did want to do two things. And so I'm going to have you close out the episode. But before that, I wanted to give a message to those tuning in. So I wanted to say that this has been such an amazing time being able to record so many amazing episodes throughout 2024 and those releasing in early 2025. It's an absolute honor. I mean, within the time that I've had this Tansson Talks show since February 2023, I've had guests on from throughout the United States, continental, and Hawaii, alongside the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and even other countries such as Argentina, the United Kingdom, Peru, someone in South Korea as well, alongside now Ireland, and so that's so exciting. Like I said, to have so many connections, have made so many friends, and it's an honor of a lifetime. And so I just wanted to say a massive thank you for those who are tuning in now on episode 108. And now I want to turn the page over and allow for you to go ahead and close out our episode today and this winter season by ending us out with a inspirational thought, life lesson, or whatever the case may be. The floor is all yours.
Ooh. Give me 2 seconds. This is a hard one. Okay. If you're trying to be liked by everyone, it's not gonna work. The best thing you could do is be yourself, be your authentic self, because that's the reason why God put you on this world, or whoever you believe put you into this world. So be yourself, and it will pay off. The right people will come to you, and they need to come to you, and the wrong people will leave. If people leave, just count it a blessing because they're there for a reason, and it has nothing to do with you in terms of who you are. But yeah, just be yourself and unapologetically be yourself. But yeah, that's my piece of advice.
I love that. I said thank you so much for being on here, for being an amazing guest, being an amazing host yourself, and I wish you the absolute best as we head into 2025.
Thank you so much, Brandon. It was a pleasure being on the podcast. But yeah, see you soon, guys.
Yeah, for those tuning in, thank you so much as always, and I will see you in the next one as we continue on our mission to bring people together. See you next season. Take care.